Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So Mr. Smith Goes to Washington came out in 1939 and it's directed by Frank Capra and stars Jean Arthur and James Stewart. So in this film we see James Stewart play a character called Jefferson Smith, and Jefferson Smith is the newly appointed senator in the Washington Senate. And well, he's been newly appointed because the previous senator has died. So Jefferson Smith, he goes to Washington DC to become the new Senate, and he wants to make a difference. He wants to get this bill passed, but he soon realizes that it's more difficult than he thought it would be, and that the US Senate is actually quite corrupt, and there's a lot of corruption going on in the political system that he didn't realize. So I'll start off by saying that this film came out in 1939, and 1939 was a very big year for American cinema because we had two very big films came out in 1939, Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. And you also had other great films such as this, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. You also had Stagecoach, which was a Western with John Wayne, and Goodbye Mr. Chips. So there were lots of great films that came out that year. This film was nominated for 11 Oscars, but it only won one Oscar, which was for Best Original Story. So obviously it had all those other films to compete with. So that's why it probably didn't win quite as many Oscars as some of the other films. This film really launched James Stewart's career because before this film, James Stewart wasn't a particularly well-known actor, but really this was his first big film, so he later went on to star in bigger films like The Philadelphia Story and It's a Wonderful Life. And it was interesting how on the cover, well, on the Blu-ray and DVD behind me, Jean Arthur's name is actually first before James Stewart, even though James Stewart really plays the main character. That's because Jean Arthur was already quite a famous actress at the time, whereas James Stewart wasn't. So if they had James Stewart's name first, people wouldn't know who he was. It's as simple as that. And James Stewart really does give a very good performance in this film. He's a very likable character. He's a bit naive at first, but his character develops along the way, and we really see James Stewart give an excellent performance right towards the end of the film. Jean Arthur is also very good as Clarissa Saunders in this film. Quite a lot of the time, Jean Arthur's character Clarissa is sort of pulling the strings with James Stewart's character a bit and showing him the way things work in Washington. And there's a very good scene with Jean Arthur in this film where she explains the process of how a bill works and how a bill is passed in Congress, which I found quite interesting because I myself, as a British guy, I don't necessarily know as much about American politics and how it works as well lots of American citizens will. So I find that side of it quite interesting. This film was actually quite controversial when it came out at the time because it obviously shows a corrupt side to government and shows a slightly anti-democratic side to what's going on with the political system in Washington, but at the same time it received quite a lot of praise because it's quite a patriotic film, and it's a film about loyalty and hard work as well, and American values. So for that, it got good praise, but at the same time being quite controversial. So this was the first time that I had ever seen this film personally, and it was never really a film that I was that excited about seeing. I'd heard of it before, but it didn't really sound like the most exciting film to me. It didn't really sound like a film that I'd be excited about seeing. And I have to say, after about the first 20 minutes of this film, about a 20-minute point, I was thinking, this does seem a bit of a boring film. It's not particularly interesting. And yeah, not the most exciting film. But I think once it reached about the half hour, 45-minute mark, I was really getting into it once we get to know James Stewart's character a bit better and Jean Arthur's character as well. The film really picks up and you really get a sense of the tension and the situation which is going on in Washington that James Stewart's character, Jefferson Smith, is involved in. And from that moment on, I was hooked, to be honest. I really wanted to keep watching, wanting to know what was going to happen next, what was going on. And I must say, I do really like Claude Rains' character, Joe Payne, Senator Joe Payne in this film, because the character Joe Payne is is also a senator, but he was friends with Jefferson Smith's father. So there's a personal relationship there. So at the start, we think his character is a really good guy, but we start to see his character change. He becomes a bit darker, and he's a character who's really involved in the political system that is going on in Washington, and Jefferson Smith really doesn't realise it and is really shocked and surprised when Joe Payne suddenly shouts him down and starts sort of going against him and turning against a man who he thought was his friend and who was obviously friends with his dad. So that was really interesting to see, and Claude Baines is a very good actor. I've seen him in lots of other films like Casablanca and Lawrence of Arabia, and he's always been very good in those films. So it was excellent to see him in this as well. I probably can't say I would recommend this film for everyone because it's not. I don't know if everybody would have the patience for it, to be honest. I think you do need to be quite patient to wait for it to get going and pay attention quite a lot. And it's not the most action-packed scene, though the scene towards the end is very good. It's probably the best scene at the end. I won't spoil it for you and tell you exactly what happens, but the scene at the end is the best scene in the film. It is quite a slow-paced film. It does take a while for things to get going. As I said before, I found it quite boring towards the start, but it was worth it at the end. I think it was an excellent payoff. And I think overall this is a very good film. It just won't be to everyone's taste. You need to be fairly patient. And well, if you're someone who really likes films and you really like old films, you're really interested in classic Hollywood cinema, then I would say this is a must watch. And this has often been regarded as one of the greatest films of Hollywood cinema and of classic Hollywood cinema. And if you like James Stewart as an actor, then this is one of his best films. I mean, James Stewart's been in lots of good films, but this was one which really launched his career, and you can really see him have an impact on this film. It's hard to see anyone except James Stewart in the role of Jefferson Smith in this film. So for that, I have to say it's worth watching for most people. However, if you're not into serious political dramas, then it's probably quite hard to recommend, and I'm not sure everyone would enjoy it. So overall, I'm going to give Mr. Smith Goes to Washington an 8 out of 10. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. There we go. So what do you guys think? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Please let me know what you think down in the comments. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.